Why did the laughter stop the moment she didn't look up? The joke had landed the way jokes like that always did, easy, careless, designed to establish dominance without effort. A fresh trident on a chest. Confidence sharpened by youth. A Navy SEAL asking a woman behind a desk what her rank was, not because he cared, but because he wanted the room to hear the answer, or the lack of one. She didn't flinch, didn't stiffen, didn't rush. Her pen moved across the clipboard with mechanical precision, stamping badges in a rhythm so consistent it bordered on unnatural. 2 seconds. Pause. Stamp. Again. The man waited for a reaction, a blush, an apology, something to confirm what he already believed. Nothing came. Families stood behind him in line, mothers holding folded programs, fathers adjusting collars, children tugging at sleeves. The base smelled of salt air and jet fuel. Overhead, engines roared as aircraft lifted off, shaking the concrete beneath their feet. It was a day meant for ceremony, for pride. "Hey," he said again, louder now, "I asked you something." Still, she didn't look up. "Petty Officer Morrison," she said calmly, voice level, eyes on the list. "Your guests are cleared. Please direct them to the designated seating area." That should have been the end of it. It was. The men around him chuckled, encouraged, the way young wolves did when they thought the hierarchy was clear. "You even know where you work," another added. "This isn't a mall." She finally raised her eyes. They were steady, not cold, not warm, just present, the kind of eyes that didn't rush to fill silence. "I understand my responsibilities," she said. "Is there anything else you require?" It wasn't defiance. That was what unsettled him. It was control. The discomfort rippled outward. A veteran in line shifted his weight. A woman looked away. No one intervened. No one ever did. The SEAL leaned in closer, voice dropping into something sharper. "Respect matters here." She held his gaze without blinking. Respect, she thought, wasn't loud. And it wasn't demanded. When the Master Chief's radio crackled, her body moved before her mind did, straightening, aligning, a posture drilled into muscle long before this desk, before this base, before this quiet life. The Master Chief noticed. He noticed the way she stood, the way the noise didn't touch her breathing, the way humiliation slid off her like rain. Later, when a worn challenge coin slipped from her clipboard and rang against the concrete, he noticed that too. She picked it up quickly. Too quickly. And for the first time that afternoon, something shifted. But no one asked yet. Not out loud. Why did she arrange the crowd like a defensive perimeter? No one questioned it at first. They were grateful, efficient flow, clear exits, children closest to open space, veterans near structural cover. It looked like good organization. But it wasn't organization. It was instinct. She tracked movement without appearing to look, counted bodies, noted angles. When a maintenance truck rolled too close to the fence line, her attention followed it until it cleared the zone. When radios crackled, her responses came crisp, correct, military. "Roger that." "Not okay." "Roger." The Master Chief felt it in his gut before he could name it, the way you did when something didn't fit the file. When he asked her if she had training, she gave him half an answer. "I've had some experience." It was enough to stop a civilian supervisor. Not enough to fool someone who'd spent decades in hostile places. Then the ceremony began. Applause, medals, stories of courage read aloud. She listened differently than the families did, not as inspiration, as memory. When a senior female operator received her commendation, Selene, because that was the name on her badge, came to attention without thinking. Perfect, flawless, as if a switch had been thrown inside her. The Master Chief saw the tears she didn't let fall. Still, no one asked the question that mattered. Not yet. Why did she step onto the platform when the shots echoed? The sound came from the perimeter, distant, sharp, not ceremonial, not training. The crowd hesitated. Confusion bloomed like a slow wave. Then she moved. Not toward cover. Toward command. Her voice cut clean through panic. Clear roots, calm orders, authority that didn't seek permission. Civilians moved where she told them to move. SEALs responded before realizing why. Even the admiral paused. Then his voice came over the radio. "Chief Parker, you have tactical command." The silence afterward was heavier than the gunfire. 200 people stared as the woman they'd ignored became the center of gravity. She didn't explain, didn't justify, didn't look back at the men who'd mocked her. She simply worked. When it was over, when the threat withdrew without breach, when the base stood intact, she exhaled for the first time in minutes. The Master Chief looked at her differently now. So did everyone else. But the weight she felt wasn't pride. It was exposure. Who was she really? And why had she tried so hard to disappear? Why did she choose a desk after a war? The answers didn't come all at once. They never do. They came in fragments, in deflections, in conversations held quietly away from curious ears, in files marked vague, in references that confirmed nothing while denying nothing. She hadn't lied. She survived. Medical retirement wasn't an ending. It was a fracture, a body that healed faster than a mind, a soul that needed quiet after too much noise. She hadn't taken the job because it was beneath her. She'd taken it because it was small, because it didn't ask her to decide who lived and who didn't. When the young SEAL came to apologize, she listened, really listened, to the shame in his voice, the growth forming in its place. She accepted it, not because she needed it, because he did. Why did command salute her name later? Because rank had never been the point. Competence had. Because dignity didn't announce itself. It waited. And when the moment came, it acted. She didn't reclaim who she used to be. She chose who she would become. A mentor, a quiet force, a reminder that strength isn't proven by volume but by restraint. And as the base settled into evening, the same place that had laughed now watched her with something new. Respect. Not because she demanded it, but because she earned it without ever asking. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. Why did the Master Chief keep watching her instead of the ceremony? He told himself it was habit. Decades in uniform had trained his eyes to drift toward the edges of things, to what didn't belong, to what moved differently, to what felt quiet when it should have been noisy. But even as medals were pinned and applause rose and fell in predictable waves, his attention kept returning to the woman near the perimeter. She wasn't clapping. Not because she was disengaged, because her hands were occupied, one resting lightly near the radio clipped at her waist, the other loosely at her side, fingers relaxed but ready. Her gaze swept the crowd in slow arcs, never lingering long enough to draw attention. She stood where she could see the ceremony platform, the exits, the access road, and the water beyond the fence line. One position, 4 sightlines. No civilian training taught that. When the first recipient stepped forward, the crowd leaned in. Cameras rose. Pride filled the air like static. The Master Chief glanced back at Selene just as a child darted away from his mother, weaving between folding chairs toward the aisle. Selene moved before the mother noticed. She didn't rush, didn't shout. She took 2 steps, intercepted the child gently, lowered herself to his height, and pointed him back toward his seat. The child nodded, unafraid. He hadn't sensed danger because she hadn't created any. Crisis prevention, not response. The Master Chief felt something old stir in his chest. Recognition. The kind that came with equal parts respect and unease. He'd seen this before. Operators who'd been out too long. People who couldn't turn it off, even when they desperately wanted to. She was pretending to be small. The ceremony continued, but her mind drifted. Selene listened as citations were read, but each word dragged something loose inside her. Names of places she'd never say out loud. Phrases like "under fire" and "without regard for personal safety" that sounded clean when read from paper, nothing like the chaos they represented. She kept her breathing steady. In through the nose, out through the mouth. She told herself she was here to help families find seats, to stamp badges, to do a job that ended at 5 o'clock, a job that didn't follow her home. But when the senior female operator stepped forward, shoulders squared, eyes forward, Selene's throat tightened. Not envy. Grief. For a version of herself that no longer existed. She hadn't lost rank when she left the teams. She'd lost certainty. The Master Chief approached her after the hymn ended, choosing his moment carefully. He didn't want to spook her. People like her notice pressure instantly. "Miss Parker," he said casually, as if asking for directions, "you did well today." She inclined her head. "Thank you, Master Chief." Most civilians would have smiled. She didn't. Praise made her uncomfortable. "Your crowd flow," he continued. "Smart choices." She met his eyes then, just long enough to respond. "It keeps people safe." A simple answer, a revealing one. He nodded, filing it away. "You ever worked security?" She hesitated. A fraction of a second. "Enough." "Not formally," she said. Another half-truth. He didn't push, yet. Instead, he asked her to assist with a routine radio check. A test, harmless, administrative. Her response came instantly. Clean phrasing, proper cadence, no filler. Operators nearby glanced up, puzzled. The Master Chief felt the last of his doubt evaporate. This wasn't exposure through arrogance. It was exposure through necessity. And necessity had a way of dragging truth into daylight. As the radio check ended, Selene handed the equipment back, hands steady, posture neutral. She felt it, the slip. The moment she'd allowed herself to sound like who she used to be. Her stomach tightened. She promised herself she wouldn't do that again. After the ceremony, as families dispersed and the base relaxed, she worked methodically, guiding traffic, answering questions, restoring order. Normalcy returned the way it always did, slowly, unevenly, pretending nothing had happened. But something had. The SEAL who'd mocked her earlier sat with his team near the front. Their energy had changed. Less noise, more glances. She felt their eyes on her and ignored them. Not out of pride. Out of self-preservation. Attention led to questions. Questions led to doors she wasn't ready to open. When the Master Chief finally asked her directly about her training, she felt the familiar wall rise inside her. The one she'd built brick by brick since leaving the field. "Some experience," she said evenly. Not a lie. Just incomplete. He saw through it. She knew he would. Men like him always did. But then the radio erupted. The tone changed, urgency replacing routine, words tightening. Suspicious activity, multiple points. Her pulse quickened, not with fear but with clarity. This was real. She watched the Master Chief's shoulders square as command instincts took over. But before he could issue orders, she saw it. The gap. The moment between recognition and response where chaos could slip in. And without deciding to, she stepped forward. "Recommend overwatch on buildings 8 and 15, she said calmly. "They cover secondary breach points." Silence followed. Not because she was wrong. Because she wasn't supposed to know that. Every eye turned toward her. She felt the weight of it, years of hiding pressing back against the instinct to act. Her heart hammered once hard. Then the Admiral's voice cut through the noise. And the decision was no longer hers. Command shifted. She took it. The next 15 minutes passed in controlled intensity. Orders given, acknowledged, executed. The base moved as a single organism, responding to a threat that never quite materialized but could have. When it was over, when the alert level dropped and breathing returned to normal, Selene felt the delayed tremor in her hands. She clenched them until it passed. The Master Chief approached her again, this time without pretense. "That was textbook," he said quietly. "You don't learn that on the job." She looked past him toward the water. "Some skills don't fade." "No," he agreed, "they don't." There was a question hanging between them now, heavy, unavoidable. "Who are you?" She didn't answer it. Not yet. Later, alone near the edge of the base, she sat on a bench overlooking the bay, watching the sun dip toward the horizon. The wind carried familiar sounds, metal on metal, distant engines, voices calling cadence. Her chest ached with a longing she tried to bury. She hadn't missed the danger. She missed the clarity, the sense of purpose that came when everything extraneous fell away. But she also remembered the cost, the nights she couldn't sleep, the faces she saw when she closed her eyes, the reason she'd chosen anonymity over recognition. Behind her, footsteps approached. She didn't turn. The Master Chief stopped a respectful distance away. "I won't pry," he said, "but I want you to know something." She waited. "Whatever you were," he continued, "whatever you did, you still belong here. You don't have to wear a uniform to matter." She swallowed. Belonging was a dangerous word. He left her then, understanding that some truths surfaced only when they were ready. As the sky darkened, Selene stood and headed for her car. Tomorrow would bring questions, investigations, conversations she could no longer avoid. The desk job was over. The quiet was ending. And for the first time since she'd walked away from everything she was trained to be, Selene Parker wasn't sure whether she was terrified or relieved. Why did the base feel smaller the next morning? Selene noticed it the moment she stepped through the gate. Same guard, same nod, same clipboard tucked under her arm, but the air had shifted like a room after an argument no one acknowledged out loud. Conversations softened when she passed. Eyes lingered a second too long, then snapped away. Respect, curiosity, uncertainty, all tangled together. She kept her pace steady. Control what you can, ignore the rest. The events of the previous day replayed in fragments she couldn't fully silence. The sound of the radio, the Admiral's voice using a title she hadn't answered to in years, the way command had slid onto her shoulders as naturally as a second skin. She'd gone home exhausted, not physically, but in the way that came from being seen too clearly. Sleep had come in shallow waves, dreams half remembered, doors opening to places she'd sworn never to enter again. At the registration desk, she set her things down with practiced precision. Pen aligned, clipboard squared, badge scanner tested. Normal. That's what she needed, normal. It lasted less than 10 minutes. "Good morning, Miss Parker." She looked up to see the Master Chief standing there, coffee untouched in his hand. He wasn't smiling, but there was no severity in his expression either, just intent. "Good morning, Master Chief." He glanced around, then lowered his voice. "Do you have time later today, somewhere private?" There it was. The inevitable. "Yes," she said after a moment, "later." He nodded, satisfied. "I'll coordinate." As he walked away, Selene exhaled slowly. There were conversations she could manage, apologies, logistics, even investigations. But this one felt heavier. This one carried history. She processed guests with her usual efficiency, but her mind stayed alert to the edges. When a group of newly minted seals approached the desk, she felt it before she saw them. The same men. Yesterday's arrogance had been replaced with something quieter, Uncertainty, humility maybe, or the first brush with it. The one who'd started it, Morrison, stepped forward. He hesitated, then straightened. "Miss Parker," he said, "we owe you an apology." The words landed without drama, no performance, no attempt to save face. She studied them for a moment, young, capable, still learning who they were when no one was cheering. "I appreciate that," she said simply. Morrison swallowed. "What we said yesterday, it was out of line." She nodded once, acceptance, not absolution. "What you did during the incident," another added, "that was impressive." Selene felt the familiar urge to deflect, to minimize. She resisted it. "It was necessary," she replied, "that's all." Morrison held her gaze. "Ma'am, with respect, why are you here?" It wasn't accusation. It was curiosity stripped of ego. She considered him, considered the question. "Sometimes," she said slowly, "the hardest assignment isn't the one that pushes you forward. It's the one that lets you stop running." They didn't fully understand. That was okay. Growth rarely arrived all at once. After they left, she felt something unexpected settle in her chest. Closure. Not forgiveness, but recognition. By midday, the questions intensified. Senior enlisted personnel lingered near her workspace under the guise of routine checks. Civilian supervisors suddenly wanted updates they'd never requested before. Whispers followed her like echoes. She stayed professional, calm, unremarkable. But inside, the walls were thinning. The meeting with the Master Chief took place in his office, a space heavy with years of service. Photographs lined the walls, teams, deployments, faces etched with shared history. He gestured for her to sit. She didn't. Not because she was defiant. Because sitting felt like surrender. "Yesterday," he began, "wasn't luck." She said nothing. "I've seen people freeze under pressure," he continued. "I've seen trained operators fail. What you did, how you assessed, how you led, that comes from experience most never get." She finally met his eyes. "Master Chief," she said evenly, "I didn't come here to relive that life." He nodded. "I figured." Silence stretched between them. "Are you going to make me leave?" she asked. The question surprised them both. He frowned. "No, this isn't a witch hunt." "Then what is it?" He leaned back, folding his arms. "It's concern, and respect, and a need to understand how someone with your background ended up behind a registration desk." Her jaw tightened. "I ended up here," she said quietly, "because I needed quiet. I needed to be useful without being responsible for outcomes that follow you home." The words cost her more than she let show. He absorbed them, then nodded once. "I won't ask for details," he said, "but command is going to notice. They already have." "I know. And when they do," he continued, "they'll want to use you." She felt the old resistance rise. "I'm not deployable." "That's not what this is about." She studied him, searching for hidden agendas, found none. "You don't have to disappear to heal," he said, "and you don't have to go back to the field to matter." Something in her expression cracked, not broken, just vulnerable. "I don't know how to be that person anymore," she admitted. He softened. "You don't have to know today." The afternoon brought confirmation of what she'd already sensed. A discreet call from administration, a request for updated records, a polite but firm reminder that her file would be reviewed. No accusations, just inevitability. By evening, the Admiral requested a meeting. She walked to the waterfront again afterward, needing space to think. The sun was low, painting the bay in copper and gold. Ships moved steadily, purposeful, unbothered by the weight she carried. She remembered another shoreline, another sunset, a different version of herself checking gear while pretending not to be afraid. That woman had been sharp, focused, certain. This one felt older, quieter, still strong, but changed. Footsteps approached again. This time she turned. The Admiral stopped a few feet away, hands clasped behind his back. "Miss Parker," he said gently, "may I?" She nodded. They sat in silence for a while, rank dissolved in the quiet. "I gave you command yesterday," he said finally. "Not because of a file, because I trusted what I saw." She swallowed. "I didn't mean to overstep." "You didn't," he replied. "You filled a gap, that's leadership." He turned to her. "I know you're carrying more than you show." She held his gaze. "I didn't come here to be special." "I know," he said. "You came here to survive." The word landed softly. "I want you to understand something," he continued. "You are not in trouble, you are valued, and whatever comes next will be on your terms." She considered that. Choice had been a rare commodity in her former life. "Thank you, sir." As night settled over the base, Selene drove home with the windows down, letting the cool air clear her head. Tomorrow would bring answers, revelations, decisions. She didn't know where she would land. But for the first time in a long while, she wasn't bracing for impact. She was standing. And that, she realized, might be the beginning of something she'd thought was lost forever. Not a return to who she had been, but permission to become someone new. Why did the knock on her door sound like a countdown? It came just after dawn, measured, deliberate, neither urgent nor casual. 3 knocks, a pause, then one more, softer than the rest. Selene stood in her kitchen holding a mug she hadn't realized had gone cold, watching steam fade into nothing. For a moment she considered not answering, not because she was afraid of who stood on the other side, but because she knew what the knock represented. Transition. Once you opened certain doors, you didn't get to pretend they'd never been there. She set the mug down, squared her shoulders, and opened the door. 2 uniformed personnel stood outside, posture respectful, eyes alert but not invasive. One was a lieutenant she didn't recognize. The other, a civilian woman with a clipped badge and a tablet held close to her chest, offered a small, careful smile. "Ms. Parker," the woman said, "thank you for meeting with us." Selene nodded. "I was told to expect you." No explanation was offered, none was needed. The drive back to the base was quiet. The lieutenant focused on the road. The civilian reviewed notes without reading them. Selene watched the coastline slide past, the water calm in a way that felt almost mocking. She remembered other drives like this, windows blacked out, destinations classified, the air thick with anticipation and unspoken rules. This time was different. She wasn't being deployed. She was being acknowledged. They led her not to an interrogation room but to a conference space overlooking the runway. Sunlight spilled across the polished table. Aircraft moved in the distance, steady and predictable. A deliberate choice, she realized. Transparency. Grounding. The Admiral was already there, so was the Master Chief. 2 other figures joined them, one medical officer, one from Personnel Command. No weapons, no guards, no ambush. "Selene," the Admiral said, gesturing to a chair, "please." She sat. The civilian woman introduced herself as a liaison for reintegration and retention. Her voice was calm, practiced, compassionate without being patronizing. "We're here to understand," the woman said, "not to reopen wounds. You control the depth of this conversation." Selene let that settle. Control, another unfamiliar gift. The questions began gently. Service history, dates, units. She answered factually, sparing detail where she could. No embellishment, no heroics. Just data points forming a skeleton of a life she rarely revisited. Then came the pause. "And the reason you left operational duty?" the medical officer asked. Selene inhaled slowly. "Accumulation," she said. "Not one incident, a pattern." They waited. "I was still effective," she continued, "but I wasn't whole, and that's not a condition you deploy with." The Admiral nodded once. Self-awareness is not weakness. She almost laughed at that, almost. They discussed her current role, why she'd chosen it, why she'd stayed under the radar. I didn't want to be exceptional, she said quietly. I wanted to be stable. The liaison smiled, understanding more than she let on. You've been stable, she said, but you've also been underutilized. There it was. Selene felt the old resistance tighten in her chest. I'm not interested in returning to combat. No one's asking you to, the Admiral replied immediately. Silence followed, real silence, the kind that allowed truth to surface. We're exploring options, he continued, that allow people like you to contribute without sacrificing what you've rebuilt. Mentorship, training advisement, strategic assessment, roles that require judgment more than endurance. Selene listened, cautious. You'd have the right to decline any assignment, the liaison added. No pressure, no obligation. Choice again. The meeting ended without decisions, only possibilities. As she left the room, the Master Chief walked beside her. You okay? He asked. She considered the question honestly. I don't know yet. He nodded, that's fair. Outside, the base was waking fully now. Morning routines resumed, orders barked, engines roared, life continued indifferent to her internal reckoning. She walked past the same registration area she'd worked for months. Someone else sat behind the desk now, stamping badges with hurried efficiency. For the first time, she felt detached from it, not superior, just finished. Later that day, she received an unexpected request. A junior officer wanted to speak with her, informally. They met near the training fields, where recruits moved through drills under watchful eyes. The officer was young but not inexperienced. His posture held tension. I was told you might understand something I'm struggling with, he said. Selene listened as he spoke about leadership, about doubt, about the fear of making the wrong call when people depended on you. He didn't know her story, not really, but he sensed the shape of it. She didn't give him answers. She gave him perspective. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt, she told him. It's the willingness to act responsibly despite it. He left lighter than he'd arrived. She stood there long after, watching recruits fall and rise and fall again. The cycle was familiar, necessary. Healing, she realized, wasn't linear. That evening, Selene returned to the waterfront one last time, not out of habit, but intention. The bay reflected the fatting sky, calm and endless. She thought about the years she'd spent bracing herself against the world, armor always half raised. The phone vibrated in her pocket. A message from the liaison. No urgency, just an update, options outlined, time granted. She slipped the phone away. Behind her, footsteps approached. Morrison, the SEAL from before, slowed when he saw her. Ma'am, he said, unsure. Relax, she replied gently, off duty. He nodded, embarrassed. I just wanted to say, he began, then stopped, restarted. Watching you, it changed how I think about leadership. She studied him, saw growth potential. Good, she said, hold on to that. As he left, Selene felt something settle, not closure but alignment. Later, alone in her apartment, she opened a box she hadn't touched since moving in. Inside lay mementos she'd packed away deliberately, a folded flag, a worn notebook, a challenge coin she'd almost dropped yesterday. She held it now, tracing the edges. She wasn't the person she'd been when she earned it. But she wasn't finished. The next morning she stood before the mirror and studied her reflection, lines etched by time and experience, eyes steadier than they used to be, softer, maybe, but clearer. She dressed simply, purposefully. When she arrived at the base, she didn't go to the registration desk. She went to the building the liaison had mentioned, the one with no signage, the one designed for people who didn't need introductions. At the door she paused. Old instincts whispered caution. New ones urged trust. She knocked. Inside, conversations quieted, heads turned. No salutes. Just acknowledgement. Selene stepped forward, heart steady, carrying every version of herself that had led her here. Not seeking redemption. Not chasing glory. Simply ready to serve again. On her own terms. Why did the room fall silent the moment she entered? Selene felt it before she saw it, the subtle shift in energy like a held breath spreading outward. Conversations trailed off. Chairs stopped creaking. Screens paused mid-scroll. It wasn't intimidation that caused the silence. It was recognition, not of rank, not of legend, but of presence. The room wasn't large, functional, windowless. Maps lined one wall. Digital feeds pulsed quietly along another. This wasn't a place for ceremony. It was where decisions were sharpened down to their barest form. No one rushed her. They didn't need to. She took the empty chair at the table's edge, deliberately choosing not to claim the center. Old habits whispered where power should sit. She ignored them. Power, she'd learned, didn't require geography. The liaison began the briefing. Low voice, controlled packing, context without dramatics. A joint training operation, multinational, low visibility, high consequence, not combat but not safe either. A region that lived in the gray spaces between war and peace. Selene listened, absorbing patterns more than words. There was a flaw. She didn't speak it yet. Around the table, analysts discussed logistics. Commanders outlined timelines. Risk matrices appeared and vanished on the screens. It was all competent, thorough. Incomplete. She waited. Experience had taught her that timing mattered more than volume. When the conversation looped back on itself for the third time, she leaned forward slightly. "What's the extraction window?" she asked. Heads turned. The liaison answered, 18 minutes. Selene nodded once, too long. Silence returned, heavier now. A commander frowned. Based on what? Local response patterns, Selene replied. They escalate faster than your model accounts for. You'll lose surprise at minute 12. The screens shifted as data was re-examined. She didn't push. She never pushed. She let the truth stand on its own. Gradually, resistance softened into curiosity. "Recommendation?" someone asked. She hesitated. This was the line she'd drawn for herself, the boundary between contribution and control. "Adjust insertion vector," she said carefully. "Shorten footprint. Prioritize exit over objective if conditions shift." A pause. Then the admiral, watching from the far end, spoke. "That aligns with my concern." The decision was amended. Selene felt no triumph, only relief. After the briefing, people filtered out quietly. A few nodded to her. One offered a brief smile. No one asked about her past. They didn't need to. The work spoke. Outside the room, the Master Chief caught up to her. "You changed the entire plan," he said. She shrugged. "I corrected a blind spot." "That's leadership," he replied. She stopped walking. "No, that's responsibility. There's a difference." He studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "Fair." Later, she found herself standing at the edge of a training field again, watching teams rehearse movement patterns. She saw the hesitations, the unspoken doubts, the places where overconfidence masked inexperience. A younger woman approached her, an intelligence officer, barely past her first deployment. "Ma'am," she said, then corrected herself. "Selene, may I ask you something?" Selene nodded. "How do you know when to step in?" the officer asked. "When to speak up?" Selene considered the question. "When staying silent would cost more than being wrong," she answered. The officer absorbed that, eyes thoughtful. That night, Selene reviewed the operation notes alone, not because she'd been asked to, but because she needed to. Sleep came easier when her mind was occupied with structure instead of memory. Still fragments surfaced. A rooftop at dusk, a radio call that came too late. The weight of knowing a different choice might have changed everything. She closed the file and breathed through it. You can't rewrite the past. You can only inform the future. The following days settled into a rhythm. Meetings, consultations, quiet influence rather than command. Selene existed in the margins, shaping outcomes without standing in the spotlight. It suited her. But the base hadn't forgotten. Neither had the people. When the training operation faced a sudden complication, a diplomatic wrinkle, a shift in host nation posture, Selene was called in again. This time, the room waited for her before beginning. She noticed. It unsettled her more than being ignored ever had. Thoughts, the Admiral asked, not as a test but as an invitation. She chose her words carefully. We're assuming cooperation where there's only tolerance. They adjusted. Later, the Admiral walked with her toward the exit. You're not hiding anymore, he observed. She looked at the floor briefly, then back up. I'm not performing either. He smiled, exactly. As the operation date approached, Selene felt the familiar tension build, not fear but readiness. She checked herself constantly, aware of the line she walked. She wasn't here to prove anything. She was here to prevent avoidable loss. On the eve of deployment, a small gathering took place in the mess hall. No speeches, no toasts, just quiet meals and shared glances, the kind of solidarity that didn't need words. Morrison sat across from her, fidgeting. You ever get used to this part? He asked. She shook her head. No, and if you do, that's when you should worry. He nodded, serious. Later, as she walked back to her quarters, the base lights casting long shadows, Selene felt a sense of alignment she hadn't known in years. Not because she'd returned to the fold, but because she'd found a way to contribute without erasing herself. Her phone buzzed with a single message from the liaison. Command has formalized your advisory role. No pressure, no ceremony. Just trust. Selene stopped walking and looked up at the night sky. Stars faint but present, fighting through the glow of the base. She thought about the woman behind the registration desk, the one who'd wanted to disappear. She honored that version of herself. She kept her alive long enough to heal. Tomorrow, the operation would move forward, far from her physical reach, but shaped by her judgment. Lives would be affected by decisions made in rooms like the one she just left. That weight no longer crushed her. It grounded her. Because strength, she realized, wasn't about stepping back into the fight, but about knowing when and how to stand just behind it. Quiet, watchful, ready. Why did the salute come when she least expected it? Selene was halfway across the tarmac when she noticed the stillness. Not the calm of routine, but the deliberate pause that happened when something unplanned was about to unfold. Conversations softened. Footsteps slowed. Even the wind seemed to hesitate, carrying the distant hum of engines without urgency. She stopped, unsure why. Across the open space, a formation of personnel stood waiting, operators, officers, enlisted, a mix that rarely gathered without a reason. At the center stood the Admiral, beside him the Master Chief. No flags, no podium, no audience beyond those already present. This wasn't ceremony. It was acknowledgement. Selene felt her chest tighten. Old instincts urged retreat. New ones told her to stay. The Admiral stepped forward. Selene Parker, he said, voice steady, carrying without amplification. Please join us. She walked toward them slowly, each step deliberate. She was acutely aware of the years compressed into this moment, the ones she'd spent proving herself, and the ones she'd spent hiding from that need entirely. She stopped at the edge of the formation. The admiral didn't speak immediately. He looked at the people assembled, men and women from different paths, different ranks, different stories, then back at her. Yesterday's operation concluded successfully, he said. No losses, no escalation, no headlines. A few quiet nods rippled through the group. That outcome, he continued, was not accidental. Cellini's throat tightened. He gestured toward her. It was shaped by judgment exercised without ego, leadership offered without demand, and experience shared without insisting on recognition. She felt exposed, not uncomfortably but truthfully. For years, the admiral said, we've talked about retention, about losing our most capable people not to failure but to silence, to the belief that stepping away means no longer belonging. He paused. That belief ends here. The Master Chief took one step forward. On my command, he said. And then it happened. The entire formation raised their hands in salute. Not to a rank she wore, not to a position she held, but to her name. The sound of it, the unified motion, the quiet precision, hit her harder than any battlefield memory ever had. Cellini stood frozen, breath caught somewhere between past and present. She didn't return the salute immediately. Not because she didn't know how. Because she hadn't expected to be worthy of it again. When she finally raised her hand, it wasn't perfect, not crisp, not polished. It was human. The salute dropped. The moment ended as simply as it had begun. People dispersed, engines restarted, life resumed its rhythm. But something fundamental had shifted. Later, alone in the quiet of her apartment, Cellini sat on the floor with her back against the couch, the challenge coin resting in her palm. She turned it over slowly, tracing the worn edges. It no longer felt like a relic of who she used to be. It felt like a bridge. The next weeks unfolded without drama, no sudden promotions, no public profiles. Her advisory role expanded naturally, shaped by need rather than optics. She mentored quietly. She reviewed plans. She asked questions that made rooms uncomfortable in the best possible way. And she went home every night. That mattered more than she admitted. One afternoon she was asked to speak, not to an auditorium but to a small group of junior personnel. No speech prepared, no slides. Just questions. They asked her about leadership, about resilience, about failure. She answered honestly. I didn't step back because I was weak, she told them. I stepped back because I was tired of surviving instead of living. They listened. I didn't come back because I missed the fight, she continued. I came back because I realized the fight doesn't always need your body. Sometimes it needs your clarity. A young woman at the back raised her hand, nervous, determined. How do you know when you're ready? She asked. Cellini smiled softly. You don't, she said. You just know when you're no longer running. The seasons changed. The base cycled through deployments and returns. Cellini became a constant, quiet, steady, trusted, not a symbol, not a legend. A presence. One evening, she found herself back at the waterfront, the same place where uncertainty had once weighed heavily on her. The water reflected the fatting sky, calm and endless. She breathed in the salt air and felt something like peace settle in her chest. Footsteps approached. Morrison stopped beside her, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed. They're talking about you in training, he said, not in the way you'd think. She glanced at him. Should I be worried? He smiled. No, they say you're the kind of leader who doesn't need to be loud. She looked back out at the water. That's good. Yeah, he agreed, it is. When he left, Cellini stayed a while longer, watching the horizon. She thought about the woman who'd once been mocked at a desk, the one who'd shrunk herself to survive, the one who believed dignity meant invisibility. She honored her too. She'd been strong in ways no one saw. As Selene turned to go, a group of young recruits passed by. One of them glanced at her, hesitated, then offered a respectful nod. Not a salute, not yet. Just recognition. Selene returned it. At home, she placed the challenge coin back in its box, but this time she left the lid open. She no longer needed to hide where she'd been, because she finally understood something she'd missed for years. Strength wasn't proven in moments of dominance. It wasn't measured by who noticed you first. And it didn't always wear rank on its sleeve. Sometimes strength waited quietly. It absorbed the weight. It chose restraint over reaction. And when the moment came, when action was required, it stepped forward without asking permission. Selene turned off the light and stood in the darkness, unafraid of what she might see when she closed her eyes. She wasn't erased. She wasn't broken. She was integrated. And in that integration, she found something deeper than validation. She found dignity. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It doesn't demand. It doesn't announce itself with noise or force. Sometimes, dignity simply acts.